6 in the morning. A woman kneels in the corner of an armory, torque wrench steady, over a disassembled 50 caliber rifle, every component laid out on the mat like instruments on a surgeon's tray. Nobody looks at her. Nobody ever has. The fluorescents overhead stutter. Go dark for half a second. Come back. Out in the corridor, boots. Even. Unhurried. The stride of a man who hasn't needed to walk fast in 32 years. The boots stop. On her sleeve, just below the unit patch, sits a small badge. Matte black. Nothing about it shines. Just a number. 3,200 meters, confirmed. That distance isn't in the training manual. It isn't in doctrine. It's barely inside the realm of physics. The room goes quiet. Not silent. Quiet the way rooms get right, before something breaks open. She sets the wrench down. Careful. Deliberate. Then she looks up. Anne. The armory smelled like gun oil, and cold metal. 6 in the morning. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they were tired of holding themselves together. General Corbin Ashford walked, through it the way he walked, through everything now. Like a man checking boxes on a life that had already been lived twice. 4 stars on his shoulders. 32 years in uniform. He'd walked through worse rooms than this. Rooms with blood on the floor. Rooms with no floor at all, just rubble and the smell of things that used to be buildings. This room was clean. Too clean. Rows of weapon racks lined the walls. M4S, M240S, anti-material rifles locked behind reinforced glass like museum pieces nobody was allowed to touch. Everything labeled. Everything accounted for. Captain Reeves trailed 2 steps behind him, tablet in hand, checking off items, with the kind of mechanical precision that came from a man who'd never once questioned why the checklist existed. Just that it did. And that it needed checking. Inventory's clean, sir, Reeves said. No discrepancies since last audit. Ashford didn't answer. Because he wasn't listening. Not really. He was scanning. Old habit. The kind you don't lose even after the war stops needing you to have it. Eyes moving row to row, looking for the thing that didn't belong. The loose bolt. The soldier standing a half-inch too still. He passed the first row. Nothing. The second. Nothing. Then he saw her. Far corner. Near the heavy weapons section. A woman kneeling beside a disassembled Barrett M82A1, the 50 caliber monster that could punch a hole through an engine block from a mile out and make the whole vehicle wonder what hit it. She worked without looking up. Bolt carrier group. Barrel. Recoil spring. Each piece laid out on a mat like a surgeon's tray. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Ashford almost walked past her. Almost. Because something snagged. A flicker. The kind of thing you can't name, but your body registers anyway, some old animal part of your brain trained to notice when the picture is wrong. He stopped. Turned back. She was still kneeling. Reassembling the lower receiver now, torque wrench steady in her hand. Standard ACUs. Hair pulled back tight. No jewelry. No makeup. Regulation down to the last thread. Except for the badge. Small. Matte black. Pinned just below her unit patch. The kind of thing most people would walk past, without a second glance. Ashford was not most people. He stepped closer. Read it once. 3,200 meters, confirmed. Read it again. Because the number didn't move. Didn't rearrange itself into something that made sense. He did the math without wanting to. Old instinct. 3,200 meters. Just under 2 miles. The longest confirmed sniper kill in modern recorded history sat at 3,540 meters. A Canadian operator. 2017, a shot that took a spotting team, perfect atmospheric conditions, and a bullet that analysts still argued about a decade later. And here. In this armory. On the sleeve of a woman nobody had bothered to look at twice. 300 meters shy of a record that had taken the entire sniper community a decade to accept as real. His jaw tightened. Soldier. The word cut through the room like something with an edge. She looked up. Gray eyes. Calm. Didn't flinch. Didn't scramble to attention like every other enlisted body in the room had just done at the sound of his voice. Sir. No inflection. No nerves. Just the word, flat and steady, like she'd already said it 1,000 times to men who thought volume equaled authority. Ashford pointed at the badge. Explain that. She glanced down. Then back up. Marksmanship Achievement Badge, sir. Confirmed long-range engagement. I know what it is. His voice dropped low. I'm asking how you have it. The room had gone quiet. Not silent. Quiet in the way rooms get right, before something happens. Every tech near enough to hear had stopped moving. Reeves stood frozen, tablet raised, stylus hovering like it had forgotten its job. She set down her wrench. Careful. Deliberate. I earned it, sir. That distance isn't in the training manual. His voice was low now. Almost private. Which made it worse. It's not in doctrine. It's barely inside the realm of physics. Respectfully, sir. A beat. It's in the record. Whose record? Mine. Silence. Ashford stared at her. She stared back. No challenge in it. No pride either. Just fact, delivered the way you'd read off a weather report. Reeves cleared his throat. Sir. Should I pull her file? Now. Fingers moving across the tablet. A few seconds. Then Reeves's face lost some color. Sir. It's restricted. Ashford turned. What? Her service record. I can access the basics. Everything past that's flagged. I'd need higher clearance. Ashford's eyes narrowed. Turned back to her. Name. Staff Sergeant Dessa Callahan, sir. How long you been at Ironcliff, Callahan? 8 months, sir. Before that? A pause. Small. But he caught it. He'd spent 3 decades learning to catch pauses like that. Deployment rotation, sir. Details are classified. He felt the air shift. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a change in pressure, the way it drops right before a storm decides to commit. He stepped closer. Lowered his voice, so it wouldn't carry past the two of them. I've worn this uniform longer than you've been alive, Callahan. I've read files on Delta operators. DevGru shooters. Assets that most colonels don't even know exist. A beat. Not one of them had a badge like that. She didn't blink. Then maybe you haven't read the right files, sir. The room might as well have been vacuum sealed. Reeves made a sound. Half cough. Half gasp he tried too late to swallow. Ashford held her gaze 5 more seconds. Long enough to make most soldiers crack. She didn't crack. She just waited, patient, like she had all the time in the world, and he was the one running out of it. He straightened. Turned on his heel. Reeves. My office. 10 minutes. Yes, sir. He walked out. The morning air hit him like a slap. Cold. Sharp. He stood on the top step, and breathed it in, trying to shake the thing crawling up his spine. Impossible. That's what the badge was. Except she hadn't looked like someone lying. She'd looked like someone stating a fact. And that was worse. 10 minutes later, Ashford sat alone in his office, staring at a tablet that refused to give him anything useful. Reeves had pulled everything he could reach on Staff Sergeant Dessa Callahan. It wasn't much. Name. Rank. MOS 11B, Infantry. Additional skill identifier B4, Sniper. Current assignment, Ironcliff, Armory Operations. Previous assignments. Redacted. Deployments. Redacted. Commendations. Redacted. The only concrete facts left standing were the ones too small to matter. Age 29. Hometown some Fleischbeck County in Montana. Enlistment date 11 years back. Everything that mattered was locked behind clearance walls Ashford didn't have. Which made no sense. He was a 4-star general. There were maybe a dozen people in the entire structure, with clearance higher than his. And here he sat, staring at a file that treated him like a civilian who'd wandered in off the street. Reeves stood near the door. Uncomfortable. The kind of uncomfortable that comes from watching your boss hit a wall he's never hit before. I've requested an access escalation, sir. Could take hours. Could take days. Tell me what you can see. Reeves scrolled. Enlisted at 18. Basic at Fort Benning. Top of her class. Selected for advanced infantry training. He paused. Then there's a gap. 6 months. Listed as, in training. No location. No unit. Sniper school. Not through the standard pipeline, sir. Whatever she did, it wasn't Benning's course. Ashford leaned back. Her qualification scores. Reeves tapped the screen. Frowned. That's odd. Define odd. They're listed as exempt. Exempt from what? Not failed. Not passed. Just, exempt. Like the test didn't apply to her. Ashford's jaw tightened. Keep going. After the training gap, she surfaces under a unit designation I don't recognize. Reeves squinted at the screen like the words might rearrange themselves into something familiar. Task Force Silverline. No base listed. No chain of command. Just the name. Silverline. Ashford had heard that name before. Years ago. A briefing nobody wrote down. Asymmetric operations. Off-the-books teams that handled situations too sensitive for anything, with a paper trail. He'd assumed it was rumor. She was with them 4 years, Reeves continued. Then reassigned here. No explanation. No transition notes. Just, dropped into armory duty. Like she's rotating off a desk job instead of whatever she was actually doing. Ashford stood. Walked to the window. Outside, the base was waking up. PT formations jogging past in loose gray columns. Vehicles crawling toward the motor pool. Routine. Ordinary. The machinery of a normal day grinding forward like it had every right to. Except nothing about Dessa Callahan was ordinary. Pull the range logs, he said. I want her shooting records. Live fire. Training. Anything with her name on it. Reeves nodded and left. Ashford stayed at the window a long time. Thinking about the way she'd looked at him. No fear in it. No pride either. Just certainty. Like a woman who'd already proven herself, so many times, that proving it again had stopped meaning anything. Odd. By 1400, Ashford had what he needed. And what he needed only raised more questions than it answered. The range logs were sparse. Callahan rarely used the training facilities. When she did, her targets sat at extreme distances. 800 meters. 1,000. 1,200. Every shot recorded as a hit. Not on target. Not effective fire. Hit. Center mass. Every single time. Ashford sat with the data a long while, feeling its weight settle into his chest like something swallowed wrong. There was a knock. "Come." Reeves stepped in. Behind him, a man Ashford didn't recognize. Older. Quiet. The kind of face that looked like it had been pulled out of retirement for exactly one purpose, and resented every minute of it. "Sir," Reeves said. "This is Colonel Drayton. JSOC." He requested a meeting. Ashford stood. "Colonel." Drayton nodded. Didn't smile. "General. I understand you've taken an interest in one of my former operators." Ashford's eyes sharpened. "Your operator. She's on loan to Ironcliff now. Officially listed as armory support." A dry pause. "Unofficially, she's on standby." "For what?" Drayton's smile came thin and brief, like something rationed. "For when we need someone who can do what no one else can." Ashford crossed his arms. "That badge. The 3,200-meter shot. Is it real?" The smile disappeared. "It's real." "How?" "Classified." Drayton let that sit a beat, before adding, "But I'll tell you this much. Dessa Callahan is the most precise long-range shooter I have ever worked with." A pause. "Maybe the best alive. She's wasted in an armory." "Is she?" Drayton tilted his head. "Or is she exactly where she needs to be, until the world needs her again?" Silence. Drayton moved toward the door. Stopped. Turned back. "One more thing, General. The shot that earned her that badge. It wasn't a training exercise. A beat that felt deliberate. Weighted. It was a live operation. High-value target. Hostages involved. No air support. No backup plan. Just her, a rifle, and 4 hours to calculate a shot that shouldn't have been possible." Ashford's breath caught. "One shot," Drayton said quietly. "One kill." Another pause, longer this time. 32 hostages walked out alive. He left. Ashford stood there, staring at the empty doorway, feeling something shift in his chest that he didn't have a name for yet. Not doubt. Not disbelief. Something closer to recognition. Like a door he hadn't known was locked had just clicked open somewhere behind his ribs. 32 hostages. He thought of his son. He always thought of his son, when numbers like that came up. Couldn't help it. Some math your body does without asking permission. He pushed the thought down. Not now. Later. Maybe. Not now. That evening, Ashford went back to the armory. Most of the techs had gone. Only a few remained, finishing logs, locking down equipment for the night. The lights buzzed the same way they always did. Cold and white and indifferent. Callahan was still there. Same corner. Same rifle. Same methodical precision, like the hours between morning and night hadn't happened to her the way they happened to everyone else. She looked up, when he was 10 feet out. "General." He stopped a few feet from her workspace. Hands behind his back. "I spoke with Colonel Drayton." No reaction. Just a single nod. "He told me about the shot." Another nod. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ashford asked. "This morning. When I questioned you, you could have explained. Defended yourself. She set down the cleaning rod she'd been working with. Respectfully, sir. I didn't need to defend myself. A pause, level and unhurried. The badge is real. The record is real. Whether you believed it, or not didn't change that. Ashford felt something flicker in his chest. Respect, maybe. Or irritation. Hard to separate the two sometimes. Most soldiers would have jumped at the chance to prove themselves, he said. I'm not most soldiers. No. He said it quietly. You're not. He watched her work a moment. The rifle gleamed under the lights. Every surface clean. Every component checked, then checked again. How do you do it? He asked. A shot like that. 2 miles. Wind. Spin drift. Coriolis. How do you account for all of it? She looked up. For the first time, something shifted behind her eyes. Not a smile. Not pride. Just honesty, plain and unadorned. You don't rush, she said. You don't guess. You calculate. You wait. And when the moment comes, you trust the work you did, before you ever pulled the trigger. Ashford nodded slowly. And if you miss? Then someone dies who didn't have to. The weight of that sat in the room a long moment. Ashford turned to leave. Stopped. Callahan. Sir. Don't let them bury you in this armory. You're better than that. She tilted her head, just slightly. With respect, sir. I'm exactly where I need to be. He studied her a long time. Then he left. The door closed behind him. Callahan went back to her rifle. Steady. Precise. Invisible. Just the way she liked it. 3 days later, the order came down, through channels that felt wrong, before Ashford even finished reading them. He read the message twice. Called Reeves in. Callahan's being pulled for a live demonstration, Ashford said, voice tight. Some VIP tour wants to see elite marksmanship. They want her on the range tomorrow. 0900. Reeves frowned. That's unusual. It's idiotic. Ashford snapped it out, before he could soften it. She's not a circus act. Want me to push back? Ashford considered it. Shook his head. No. Let it happen. Reeves blinked. Sir. If they want to see what she can do. A pause. Something cold settling into his voice. Let them see it. Maybe then they'll understand why we don't parade her around like a trophy. Reeves left, still looking confused. Ashford leaned back, and stared at the ceiling a long while. He had a feeling tomorrow was going to be interesting. The range stretched 3,000 meters, into the desert, flags marking every 100, berms rolling and falling like frozen waves under a sky that hadn't decided, yet whether it wanted to be blue, or bleached white. The VIP group arrived at 0845. Congressmen. Defense contractors. A handful of journalists trailing cameras like leashed dogs. They clustered on the observation platform, sipping coffee, talking in the low murmur of people, who knew this was a show, and had come to watch it. Ashford stood off to the side. Arms crossed. Watching. Callahan arrived at 0855, rifle case in hand. Standard ACUs. Hair pulled back. No acknowledgement of the crowd. None at all. She set the case down. Opened it. Began assembling the rifle, with the same calm efficiency Ashford had watched 100 times now in the armory. A congressman leaned toward Ashford. Is she the one? She is. Doesn't look like much. Ashford didn't answer. The range officer, a master sergeant, with 30 years behind his eyes, stepped forward. "Sergeant Callahan. You're cleared for demonstration fire. Targets at 800, 1000, 1200 meters. Wind 3 knots northwest. Pressure stable." He handed off the range like it was nothing more than a job. "You have the range." "Understood." She moved to the platform. Prone position. Adjusted the scope. The rifle looked massive against her frame. She handled it like it weighed nothing at all. Ashford watched her breathing slow. Watched stillness spread through her body like something poured, filling in every gap. Minutes passed. The VIPs shifted. One checked his watch. Another whispered something behind a raised hand. Then, boom. The rifle's report cracked across the valley like a door slamming somewhere very far away. "Stand by." The range officer, binoculars up. 3 seconds. Impact. 800 meters. Center mass. Polite applause. A contractor nodded, approving, like he'd just watched a stock tick upward. Callahan cycled the bolt. Chambered another round. Settled back into position. Another minute of stillness. Boom. Impact. 1000 meters. Center mass. More applause. Louder this time. She didn't acknowledge it. Already adjusting the scope. Recalculating. Breathing in rhythm, with a wind only she seemed able to hear. This time she waited longer. 5 minutes. The VIPs began to fidget. Ashford's jaw tightened. "Wait for it." Boom. The shot sounded different. Heavier. The valley swallowed it whole. Everyone leaned forward. The range officer raised his binoculars. Adjusted the focus. His voice, when it came, had gone flat, with something that wasn't quite disbelief, and wasn't quite awe. Impact. 1200 meters. Dead center. Within 2 inches of the kill zone. Silence. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Hesitant at first. Then louder. Callahan stood. Ejected the spent casing. Began breaking down the rifle like none of it had happened. A congressman approached Ashford. "That was impressive, General." "Truly." A pause, calculated. "But I thought we'd see something closer to her record." The 3,200-meter shot. Ashford turned. Expression hard. "You just did." "I'm sorry." "She fired at 1200, because that's what this range allows." His voice stayed even. Cold. But the precision. The consistency. The patience. The control. That's the same at any distance. A beat. "You want to see 3,200? Build me a range that long. Give her a target that matters." The congressman blinked. Said nothing useful. Ashford walked away. He found Callahan near the equipment shed, securing her rifle case. "Callahan." She looked up. "Sir. How do you feel about that?" "About what, sir?" "Being put on display like that." She shrugged. "Small. Economical. Part of the job sometimes. It shouldn't be." She met his eyes. "Respectfully, sir. I didn't mind. They needed to see what discipline looks like." A pause. "Now they have." Ashford studied her a long moment. Then nodded. "Dismissed." She turned. Walked toward the motor pool, rifle case slung over one shoulder, moving with the same quiet precision that seemed to govern everything she did. Ashford watched her go. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something close to hope. That night, in his quarters, Ashford sat with the after-action reports, and didn't read them. He was thinking about his son. 5 years now. 5 years since a decision made 2,000 miles from any battlefield had put a young pilot in the wrong airspace at the wrong hour, supporting a mission nobody outside a handful of rooms had ever heard the name of. Silverline. He'd heard the word once, buried in a briefing he wasn't supposed to remember, and it had lodged in him like shrapnel too deep to dig out. He'd never connected it. Not really. Not until today. Because Drayton had said 4 hours. A live operation. 32 hostages. Because that timeline sat close enough to the one etched into his son's memorial marker, that his stomach had gone cold reading it. Which meant nothing yet. Coincidence, maybe. The military was full of overlapping timelines, that meant nothing at all. Except he didn't believe that. Not really. Not the part of him that had spent 3 decades learning to distrust convenient coincidences. So he sat there, staring at nothing. The after-action reports untouched on the desk in front of him. Until his phone rang. Not the office line. The other one. The one that only rang when a piece of the past had decided it wasn't finished with him yet. He picked up on the second ring. Ashford. A voice he half recognized. Clipped. Formal. General. This is Major Vance. Operations desk. We need to speak with you regarding a personnel matter. Which personnel? Staff Sergeant Callahan, sir. Ashford closed his eyes. I'm listening. There's interest at a higher level in accelerating her reintegration into active operational status. We'd like your input before the order is finalized. Ashford felt something tighten behind his ribs. The same feeling he'd had standing in the armory 3 days ago. The shape of the picture, wrong. Whose interest, he said. Not a question. A demand dressed as one. A pause on the line. Longer than it should have been. That information is above this call, sir. Ashford's jaw set. Then get me someone it isn't above. The line went quiet a moment. Then Vance's voice again, careful now. I'll pass that along, General. The call ended. Ashford sat there in the dark a long while, the phone still in his hand, the after-action report still untouched, the shape of something enormous circling closer, without ever quite showing its face. 3,200 meters. 32 hostages. A son buried 5 years, and a name, Silverline, that had just stopped being a rumor, and started being a wound, with a location attached. He thought about Callahan kneeling in that corner of the armory, hands steady on a rifle, that could reach across 2 miles of desert, and end a life, before the sound of the shot ever arrived. He thought about the way she'd said it. I'm exactly where I need to be. And he wondered, not for the first time, that week, whether anyone, Drayton, Vance, whoever sat above this call, actually knew what they had. Or whether they only knew what they wanted to use. Outside his window, the base had gone dark and quiet, the way it always did this time of night. Somewhere out there, in the armory, that never quite slept, a woman was probably still cleaning a rifle she'd already cleaned twice that day. Ashford didn't know it yet. Not fully. Not with names, and dates and the certainty a man needs, before he moves against people, with more stars on their collar than he had. But he knew enough to feel the ground shift. And 32 years in uniform had taught him exactly one thing about ground, that shifted under a man's feet. You didn't wait to find out why. You moved. Fast. Before the floor decided the decision for you. He picked up the phone again. Dialed a number he hadn't used in 3 years. It rang twice. Drayton. It's Ashford. We need to talk. Somewhere that isn't a phone line. A pause on the other end. Long enough to mean something. Tomorrow. 0600. I'll find you. The line went dead. Ashford set the phone down. Looked at the window. At his own reflection in the dark glass, older than he liked to admit, carrying a grief he'd never quite finished carrying. Somewhere in this base, a soldier with a badge, that shouldn't exist was sleeping, or not sleeping, more likely, given what he now suspected about how she spent her nights, completely unaware that the man who'd questioned her in the armory 3 days ago was about to become the only person standing between her and whatever Major Vance's higher interest actually wanted from her. He didn't know her yet. Not really. But he knew this much. Whatever was coming for Dessa Callahan, it wasn't going to walk past him twice. The meeting happened at 0600, in a maintenance shed nobody used anymore, the kind of building bases keep around, because tearing it down costs more than ignoring it. Drayton was already there when Ashford arrived. Standing in the half-dark, arms crossed, looking like a man who hadn't slept, and didn't plan to mention it. "You said this wasn't for a phone line," Drayton said. "It's not." "Then talk." Ashford shut the door behind him. The hinges complained. Somewhere outside, a generator hummed low and constant, the only sound for half a mile in any direction. "Silverline," Ashford said. 5 years ago. A hostage operation. 32 lives. He let that sit a beat. "My son flew close air support on the extraction." Drayton's face didn't move. But something behind his eyes did. Small. Fast. Gone before Ashford could be sure he'd seen it. "Your son. Captain Marcus Ashford. Flew a support sortie that got rerouted at the last minute. Bad weather call, they told me. Equipment failure, they told me later, when the first story stopped making sense." Ashford's jaw tightened. "He never came home." Drayton exhaled through his nose. Slow. Controlled. The exhale of a man deciding how much truth a room could hold. "I didn't run that op," he said finally. "Who did?" Silence. Drayton. There was a coordination cell above the tactical team. Logistics, funding, target packages. All of it ran through a single office. A pause, waited. Victor Malik. The name landed in Ashford's chest like something dropped from a height. Malik. Then a colonel. Now a brigadier general. Drayton's voice stayed flat. "Sits 3 floors up from the people who actually pull triggers, and likes it that way. He approved the reroute. He approved the whole operation. Every variable in it." Drayton's voice had gone careful now, the way men get careful when they're saying something that could cost them everything if it lands in the wrong ears. "If your son's sortie got rerouted, that decision came from his desk. Or from someone who answered to him." Ashford stood very still. Because there it was. 5 years of grief, with no shape to it, no name to hang it on, and now. Now it had a name. "And Callahan," Ashford said. "She was on that operation. She was the operation." Drayton's voice dropped lower. "One shooter. 4 hours. A shot nobody thought was possible, until she made it. 32 hostages walked out because of her." A pause. "Your son helped make that possible. Whatever cost him his life, that night, it bought her the room to take that shot." Ashford closed his eyes. Because that was the cruelest kind of math. The kind where a stranger's daughter lives, and your own son doesn't, and both facts are true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other out. "Does she know?" Ashford said. "About my son? About the connection?" "No." Drayton shook his head once. "She knows an aircraft went down covering her extraction. She doesn't know whose. Names like that get scrubbed fast in operations like Silverline. Faster than you'd believe. Then someone's about to unscrub it. Drayton's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Vance called me last night. Said there's interest at a higher level in accelerating Callahan's reintegration into active operations. Ashford's voice hardened. Wouldn't say whose interest. Drayton went quiet a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Something careful in it. Something that sounded, for the first time, almost like fear. That's Malik's language, he said. Reintegration. Accelerated timeline. He's been trying to get her back under his authority for 2 years. Ever since she rotated off Silverline. Why? Because she's the most valuable asset he's ever touched, and he never stopped thinking of her as his. Drayton's mouth tightened. He found her. Recruited her out of basic, when she was 19. Built the whole program around what she could do. In his head, that makes her his to deploy however he sees fit. Ashford felt something cold settle behind his sternum. Not while I'm standing between them. Drayton studied him a long moment. That's a fight you don't fully understand yet, General. Then help me understand it. I can't. Not all of it. Drayton moved toward the door. Stopped. But I'll tell you this much for free. Whatever's coming for Callahan, it's coming soon. And it's not going to look like a threat. It's going to look like an opportunity. That's how Malik always does it. He left. The generator hummed on outside, indifferent, and Ashford stood alone in the half-dark, carrying a name that had just turned 5 years of grief into something with an address. Victor Malik. He'd remember it. 3 days later, the opportunity arrived, exactly the way Drayton said it would. Dressed up nice. Wearing a smile. The message came down, through official channels, but felt wrong the moment Ashford read it, the way a familiar road feels wrong, when someone's moved the mile markers. A congressional delegation was inbound. Senators. Defense Committee staff. Brass from Washington, with medals they'd never earned in combat, and opinions they'd never questioned. They wanted a capability demonstration. Air support, ground assault, precision fires. A show of force to justify next year's budget line. And they wanted, specifically, to see the sniper who'd made the impossible shot. Ashford read the request twice. Found the name buried in the routing header, the one that had authorized the demonstration in the first place. Office of Strategic Asset Deployment. Director, Brigadier General Victor Malik. Of course. Ashford called Reeves in. Find out who requested Callahan by name. Reeves came back an hour later, looking like he'd rather deliver anything but this. Senator Holloway, sir. Chair of Armed Services. Apparently he read a classified brief on some rescue operation, and wants to see, quote, what America's most lethal sniper looks like in action. A pause. His words. Not mine. Tell him no. I can't do that, sir. This came down from a 2-star's office. It's not optional. Ashford's jaw worked. He already knew whose office. Fine. Let it happen. Reeves blinked. Sir. Let them see her. Ashford's voice went low. Almost private. Maybe then they'll understand exactly what they're trying to use. He found Callahan in the armory that evening. Same corner. Same rifle. Same ritual he was starting to understand wasn't habit at all. It was armor. You heard, he said. She didn't look up. Captain Reeves told me. Tomorrow, 1400. Extended range. You don't have to do it. I'm aware. A pause, the wrench in her hand going still. I'm also aware that refusing an order, from a 2-star, requested by a sitting senator, tends to end careers a lot faster than complying with one. I'll fight it. She looked up then. Something in her face he hadn't seen before. Not quite gratitude. Closer to warning. Don't. Callahan. Sir. Her voice stayed level, but there was steel under it now. You fight this, and it stops being about a demonstration. It becomes a general and a senator drawing lines in the sand over a staff sergeant. That doesn't end well for anyone. Least of all me. Ashford stood there. Because she was right, and he hated that she was right, and hating it didn't change a single fact of it. Then I'll be there, he said. Watching. You always are, sir. It wasn't quite a smile. But it was close enough that Ashford let himself believe, for one brief second, that something between them had shifted into a shape that might survive whatever was coming. The extended range stretched 3,000 meters into open desert, heat already shimmering off the sand by the time the VIP platform filled up. Senators. Congressional staff. Defense contractors with sharp suits and sharper interest. Cameras lining the observation deck. Someone had even wheeled in a large monitor to display the downrange feed live, because apparently theater needed better production values these days. Ashford stood off to one side. Arms crossed. Watching a man he'd never met before walk onto the platform like he already owned it. Senator Holloway. Mid-50s. Silver hair combed, with the precision of a man who'd never once in his life doubted the value of his own opinion. He shook hands. Laughed at things that weren't funny. Worked the platform like a stage. Callahan arrived at 1400 sharp. Rifle case in hand. Ignored the stares. Ignored the whispers. Set her case down, and began assembling the rifle, with the same methodical calm she used whether an audience existed or not. Holloway's voice cut through the low murmur. Sergeant Callahan. Can you tell us what makes you qualified for this kind of shooting? She didn't look up. Training, sir. Experience. Discipline. I understand you recently completed a mission, with a confirmed kill at nearly 3,000 meters. Is that accurate? Her hands paused. A fraction of a second. Then kept working. I can't discuss classified operations, sir. Holloway smiled. The kind of smile politicians wear, when they've already decided how the conversation ends regardless of what the other person says. Of course. But hypothetically. Could you make a shot like that here today? The platform went quiet. Callahan finished mounting her scope. Stood. Turned to face him directly. Hypothetically, sir. If tactical necessity and conditions aligned. A beat. Yes. Then let's see it. Her eyes narrowed. Sir. Our furthest target's what, 2,000 meters? Holloway gestured at the range like it was a toy he owned. Let's make it interesting. Double it. The range officer stepped forward fast. Senator, we don't have targets set past 2,500. The range doesn't extend. Then put one there. Holloway's smile never wavered. Use a vehicle. A barrel. Anything. I want to know if the reports are exaggerated, or if we've actually got something worth the investment. Every eye on that platform turned toward Callahan. Ashford felt his stomach drop. Because this wasn't a demonstration anymore. This was a test. Not of skill. Of obedience. And he understood, watching her face stay perfectly still, that she understood it too. Senator, Ashford said, stepping forward, voice hard. That's an unreasonable request. Conditions aren't controlled. We haven't surveyed the extended range for safety. Holloway turned that same smile on him. General Ashford. I appreciate your concern. His voice stayed smooth as glass. But we're here to see what our military is capable of. If Sergeant Callahan can't deliver under pressure, I need to know that before we allocate billions to programs based on her supposed capabilities. The words hung there like a gauntlet dropped at her feet. Ashford looked at Callahan. Shook his head, small, a silent plea. Walk away. Just walk away. She didn't look at him at all. She looked at the range. At the desert stretching out, into heat and distance, calculating something Ashford couldn't see, wind patterns and sun angle, and every variable her mind had been trained to catalog automatically. 4,000 meters, she said quietly. The platform erupted in murmurs. Holloway's smile widened. I'm sorry. She turned to face him fully. You want to see what I can do, Senator? Set a target at 4,000 meters. I'll make the shot. The range officer went pale. Sergeant, that's almost 2.5 miles. Nobody's ever made a shot like that in a training environment. The variables alone. I'm aware of the variables, Sergeant Major. Her voice stayed calm. Edged with something sharp underneath. Set the target. I'll handle the rest. It took 90 minutes to build the shot. A maintenance truck hauled a decommissioned vehicle 4,000 meters out, positioning it broadside to the firing line. Someone painted a 2-foot orange square on the door. Then they retreated, leaving it alone in the shimmering heat like an offering. Through Callahan's scope, it looked like a toy. A speck of color against sand, and stone, and distance, that seemed to swallow itself the longer you stared at it. She lay prone on the platform, rifle settled, breathing already sliding, into the slow, controlled rhythm Ashford had watched a dozen times now. Lieutenant Foss, young, pulled in from somewhere to run the spotting scope, eyes wide with something between awe and dread, lay beside her. You don't have to do this, he said, low. Meant only for her. Holloway's playing games. Walk away. Can't, she said quietly. Not anymore. Why? Because if I walk away, they'll say I couldn't do it. Her eyes didn't leave the scope. And the next time someone's life depends on a shot everyone says is impossible, they won't call. They'll assume it can't be done. Foss was quiet a moment. Then he settled into his scope. Winds variable. 8 to 15 knots, west. Temperature 94. Humidity 12%. A pause. Mirage is heavy. Heat distortion's going to hammer the sight picture. Callahan adjusted her scope, compensating for elevation, for a bullet that would drop 80 feet across that distance, for a flight time approaching 6 full seconds. 6 seconds during which the Earth itself would turn beneath the round, during which wind could shift twice, during which every calculation had to hold true, or the shot meant nothing. She waited. Minutes passed. The VIPs shifted, uncomfortable in the heat. Someone coughed. A camera clicked, too loud in the stillness. Holloway's voice drifted across the platform. How much longer is this going to? She fired. The rifle's thunder cracked the desert wide open. Recoil slammed through her frame. The muzzle blast kicked a cloud of dust that swallowed everything for a half-second. Then stillness. Foss counted under his breath. 3. 4. 5. 6. Everyone on that platform held their breath at the same moment, like the whole crowd had suddenly remembered how to be one organism. The radio crackled. Impact confirmed. Downrange team reporting hit on target. Repeat. Hit on target. The platform erupted. Gasps. A shout. Someone started clapping, and then everyone was clapping, the sound building like a wave breaking against rock. On the monitor, the orange square sat, with a ragged hole punched dead center, where a .50 caliber round had traveled 2.5 miles, and kept its promise. Holloway stood frozen, mouth slightly open, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. Callahan lay there, breathing slow, staring through her scope at the target she'd just hit, feeling nothing but a strange, hollow quiet. Because the shot didn't matter. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd just proven something she'd spent years trying to keep quiet, and now every person on that platform knew it. She wasn't just good. She was singular. And singular things get noticed. Singular things get used. The aftermath was chaos. Journalists swarming. Questions flying like shrapnel. Defense contractors pulling Ashford aside, already talking contracts, and capabilities, and next fiscal year's line items. Callahan packed her rifle in silence, ignoring all of it, focused on the mechanical ritual of disassembly, and storage like the noise around her belonged to some other planet. Foss appeared at her side. Eyes still wide. That was, I don't even have words. She didn't answer. 4,000 meters. In training conditions. Do you understand what you just did? You just rewrote the record books. I proved a point, she said quietly. That's all. That's all? Foss laughed, a little hysterical. Sergeant. It was a shot in controlled conditions. Her voice cut through his excitement like a blade. With time to prepare. It means nothing compared to the real thing. Foss fell silent. She finished packing her gear. Stood. Slung the case over one shoulder. She could feel eyes on her, from every direction, measuring, calculating, already reducing her down to numbers on a briefing slide. She hated it. Ashford intercepted her before she reached the vehicles. Callahan. A word. They moved off, finding a quiet corner near the equipment shed, away from the noise still rolling across the platform behind them. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, Ashford said, or the most reckless. It was necessary, sir. Was it? Or did you let them bait you into proving something you didn't need to prove? She met his eyes. If I'd refused, they'd have assumed I couldn't do it. The mission I ran 5 years ago becomes a fluke. A lucky shot. And the next time someone needs the impossible, they won't believe it's possible. So you made yourself a target instead. I made myself undeniable. Ashford was quiet a moment. Then he said the thing he'd been holding back all day. You know what happens now, don't you? A pause. Every senator, every contractor, every journalist on that platform wants a piece of you. They'll pull you into briefings, demonstrations, interviews. They'll turn you into a symbol. I won't let them. You won't have a choice. His voice hardened, urgency bleeding through it. Callahan, you just became the most valuable propaganda asset this military has. They will not let you disappear back into an armory. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. What would you do, sir? She asked, quiet. If you were me. Ashford considered the question a long time before answering. I'd remember why I took the shot in the first place. A pause. Not for them. For the mission. For the people who needed me to be impossible. Another pause, weightier. And I'd make sure that no matter what happens next, that's the only thing that matters. She nodded slowly. He turned to leave. Stopped once more. For what it's worth, Callahan. That was the most remarkable thing I've ever witnessed. A beat. And I've seen a lot of remarkable things. Thank you, sir. He left. She stood alone near the equipment shed, sun on her shoulders, listening to the celebration still rolling on across the platform behind her. 4,000 meters. One shot. Everything about to change. She just didn't know yet how much. The summons came at 0600 the next morning, delivered by an MP, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. Staff Sergeant Callahan. You're ordered to report to General Ashford's office. Immediately. She arrived 7 minutes later. Ashford sat behind his desk. But he wasn't alone. Colonel Drayton occupied one chair. Beside him sat a man she didn't recognize. Broad-shouldered. Silver at the temples. 2 stars on his shoulders, and the kind of stillness that made Callahan's instincts sharpen the second she walked through the door. Sit, Ashford said. She sat. Spine straight. Hands folded. Sergeant Callahan, Ashford began, formal, careful. This is Brigadier General Victor Malak. Something cold moved through her chest. Because she knew that name. Had known it 11 years, buried under 100 other names, but never fully forgotten. The man who'd sat across a windowless table, when she was 19, and asked her a single question. How do you feel about doing things most people consider impossible? Malak smiled. The kind of smile that had learned, somewhere along the way, to look warm, without ever quite reaching the eyes. Dessa. Not sergeant. Not soldier. Her first name, like he'd earned the right to use it. It's been a long time. General. I saw the footage from yesterday. His voice carried an easy, proprietary pride, like a man admiring something he'd built, with his own hands. 4,000 meters. Remarkable. Exactly what I always knew you were capable of. Callahan's jaw stayed still. But something behind her eyes hardened. With respect, sir. I didn't do it for an audience. No. Malak's smile didn't move. You did it, because I trained you to be undeniable. That instinct doesn't come from nowhere, Sergeant. It comes from 11 years of investment. The room went quiet. Ashford's eyes flicked between them. Something tightening in his expression, that Callahan couldn't read yet, but would come to understand meant a great deal more than it appeared to in that moment. Drayton finally spoke. Command wants to activate you full-time, he said. Pull you from armory operations. Integrate you into a dedicated special operations unit. Task Force Nightglass. A pause. Train with Tier 1 operators. Deploy on high-value missions. Under clearance that keeps your work invisible, but your capabilities accessible. And if I refuse? Malak's smile thinned by exactly 1 degree. Then you'll be reassigned to a training role, he said smoothly. 5 years teaching marksmanship fundamentals to recruits who'll never take a shot that matters. Your skills atrophy. Your value diminishes. A pause, calculated. And when the next impossible situation arises, someone else will try. And fail. Because you weren't there. The words landed like body blows. Callahan looked down at her hands. Steady. Clean. The same hands that had punched a hole through steel from 2.5 miles away yesterday. The same hands that had saved 32 lives 5 years ago, on a mission that had cost something she still didn't fully understand the price of. How long do I have to decide? She asked. 72 hours, Malak said. After that, personnel orders get cut one way or another. She stood. Saluted. Then I'll have my answer in 72 hours, sir. She left before anyone could respond. She didn't go back to the armory. Instead she walked the perimeter, hands shoved in her pockets, mind churning through the shape of a decision, that felt, the longer she turned it over, less and less like a decision at all. Embracing what Malak wanted her to become meant becoming a tool. A precision instrument, pulled out when convenient, put away when not. No autonomy. No quiet. Refusing meant irrelevance. watching from the sidelines, while situation spiraled, because she'd chosen pride over purpose. Neither option felt right. She was still walking, when footsteps caught up behind her. Foss, jogging to close the distance, slightly out of breath. Callahan. Wait. She stopped. I heard about the meeting, he said. About the choice they're giving you. Word travels fast on a base this size. Always does. He straightened, meeting her eyes. For what it's worth. I think you should take it. The night glass assignment. Her expression didn't change. Why? Because I've seen what you can do. A pause. And I've seen what happens, when people who can do what you do decide to hide instead. He told her about his father. A pilot. Apaches, years ago, overseas. The best in his unit. Tired of the deployments, the pressure, the endless scrutiny, so he requested a transfer to training command. Spent the next 8 years teaching kids to fly. He was miserable, Foss said quietly. Every day he'd come home, and talk about the missions he wasn't flying. The difference he could have made, if he'd just stayed in the fight. A pause. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. And I think part of what killed him was the regret of walking away, from what he was meant to do. Callahan was quiet a long moment. What if what I'm meant to do kills me instead, she said finally. Then at least you'll die doing something that matters. Foss shifted his weight. Look. I don't know what the right answer is. I just know, that yesterday, when you made that shot, that wasn't just skill. That was purpose. Like you were doing exactly what you were built for. Callahan studied him a long moment. Then nodded once. Thank you, Lieutenant. For what? For being honest. She walked away, leaving him standing in the sun. She didn't tell him, yet that his honesty had just planted something she'd carry, into the next decision, and the one, after that, and every decision, after that for the rest of her career. Because that's how it works. Somebody says the true thing at the right moment, and you never quite unhear it. 48 hours later, she walked into Ashford's office, and delivered her answer. Malik sat behind the desk this time, not Ashford. Drayton in the same chair as before. A different DoD official beside him now, a man named Kessler, who looked like he measured success in spreadsheets and efficiency metrics. Ashford stood off to the side. Arms crossed. Watching. Sergeant Callahan, Malik said, formal. You have a decision? She stood at attention. Spine straight. Eyes forward. I do, sir. I accept the assignment. With conditions. Kessler frowned. Soldiers don't negotiate conditions, Sergeant. I'm not negotiating. Her voice stayed even. I'm stating the terms under which I'll be most effective. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Set it on the desk. First. I maintain autonomy over mission acceptance. If I assess a shot as tactically unsound or unnecessarily risky, I can refuse without repercussion. A beat. Second. No public demonstrations. No media access. No congressional tours. I work in the shadows, or I don't work at all. Another beat. Third. I retain my current rank and pay grade. No promotions tied to publicity or political maneuvering. Kessler looked at the paper like it had personally insulted him. This is highly irregular. So is a shot at 4,000 meters, Callahan said flatly. You want irregular capabilities. You accommodate irregular requirements. Malik read through the conditions. His expression stayed pleasant. Controlled. But something flickered behind his eyes, brief and cold, gone as quickly as it appeared. Approved, he said finally. Drayton, draw up the orders. Drayton nodded. I can work with this. JSOC operates on mission effectiveness, not publicity. As long as she delivers results, command won't care about the rest. Kessler still looked skeptical. And if she refuses a mission we deem critical? Then you find someone else, Callahan said. There are other snipers. Other options. But if you want me specifically, you accept that I'm not a bullet you fire indiscriminately. I'm a precision instrument. And precision requires judgment. The room fell silent. Malik picked up a pen. Signed the paper. His smile came back, easy and warm, the same smile, from 11 years ago in that windowless room. Welcome back to active status, Dessa. A pause. I always knew you'd come around. Something in the way he said it made her skin crawl. Like the decision had never really belonged to her at all. Like she'd just walked, eyes open, into exactly the trap he'd built for her a decade ago, and simply waited to spring. She said nothing. Kessler and Malik left. Drayton followed a moment later, pausing at the door to give her a look she couldn't quite read. That left her alone with Ashford. He studied her a long moment. You know they'll push back on those conditions, he said. Try to erode them over time. I know. And you'll have to fight to maintain them constantly. I know that too. He was quiet a beat. Then why agree at all? She met his eyes. Because hiding from what I am doesn't make me less dangerous. It just makes me useless. A pause. And I'd rather be dangerous and purposeful than safe and forgotten. Ashford nodded slowly. That's the most honest thing I've heard all week. He extended his hand. She shook it. Good luck, Callahan. A pause. And remember. No matter what happens, you're still a soldier. Not a weapon. Not a symbol. A soldier. His voice hardened, just slightly. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I won't, sir. She didn't tell him what she'd felt watching Malik sign that paper. The cold certainty that she'd just handed her future to the one man who'd always seen her as something he owned. She didn't tell him, because she didn't fully understand it herself yet. Not yet. Fort Bragg hit like a wall of humidity and purpose. Task Force Nightglass operated out of a nondescript building marked only, with a number, the kind of place where classified conversations happened daily, and nobody blinked at the soundproofed walls. Master Sergeant Reyna ran the unit. Mid-40s, scarred jaw, eyes that had clearly seen more than they let on. She met Callahan at the door, with a look that measured everything about her in about 4 seconds flat. Sergeant Callahan. I'm Reyna. I run this team. She gestured to a conference room. Have a seat. Your team's waiting. 6 faces turned toward her when she walked in. 5 men, 1 woman, all of them looking like they'd been carved out of granite and stress. Reyna made the introductions fast. Names, specialties, the kind of shorthand operators use, because there's no time in this line of work for anything longer. Then she got to the point. We've read your file. What wasn't redacted, anyway? A pause. Impressive shots. Impressive record. But we need to establish something right now. This isn't a solo act. You don't take shots without coordination. You don't make calls without consulting the team. Understood, Callahan said. But I also don't take shots I'm not confident in. If the tactical picture doesn't align with capability, I'll say so. One of the operators, Foss, she realized, seated at the far end, reassigned here without her knowing, leaned forward. You saying you know better than the mission commander? I'm saying I know my limitations. And I won't pretend otherwise just to make someone comfortable. The room went quiet a moment. Then the woman across the table, Kessler had introduced her, as Bram, leaned forward. Good. Last sniper we had would take any shot command asked for. Got 2 hostages killed overseas, because he couldn't admit the angle was wrong. Reyna nodded slowly. We work on trust here, Callahan. You trust us to get you into position and keep you alive. We trust you to tell us what's possible, and what's suicide. Can you do that? Yes, Sergeant. Then welcome to Nightglass. We deploy in 3 days. Training starts now. The next 72 hours were the most intense of her career. Reyna ran her through scenarios that made her previous training look like basic drills. Hostage rescue in urban terrain. Target interdiction during active firefights. Counter-sniper operations against trained adversaries, who knew every trick she knew, and a few she didn't. Every exercise pushed her to the edge of her capabilities. And kept pushing. But she held. On the second day, Reyna put her in a rooftop overwatch simulation, while the team assaulted a building 300 meters away. Hostile snipers in elevated positions. Civilians moving through simulated streets. A target that had to go down, before the breach, or the whole team died. Callahan identified the hostile in 8 seconds. Calculated the shot in 12. Fired on 18. Clean kill. Reyna reviewed the footage afterward, arms crossed. How'd you spot him so fast? Shadow inconsistency. Everyone else on that rooftop cast shadows consistent with the sun angle. His was off by 3 degrees. Meant he was using artificial concealment. Bram whistled low. That's good. That's scary good. She just outthought a computer simulation, someone else muttered. Callahan didn't respond. She was already filing the lesson away. Artificial concealment creates microtells. Remember that. On the 3rd day, they gave her the real test. Live fire. Actual targets, decommissioned vehicles placed at ranges, from 800 to 2400 meters. Variable wind. Time pressure. The team moving, through a simulated combat zone, while she held overwatch, from a ridgeline. 11 shots in 30 minutes. 10 hits. 1 miss when a wind gust shifted mid-flight. Reyna climbed up to her position afterward, breathing hard from the elevation. That miss, she said. What happened? Wind shear. Thermal layer shifted. I didn't compensate fast enough. What would you do different? Wait 3 more seconds. Let the gust pass. Take the shot in the calm window. And if 3 seconds meant the team died? Callahan met her eyes. Then I'd take the shot, and accept the odds. But I'd rather wait and guarantee the hit. Reyna studied her a long moment. Then extended a hand. You'll do, Callahan. You'll do just fine. Callahan shook it. Felt the calluses. The strength. The approval. For the first time, since arriving, she felt like she belonged somewhere. She didn't know, yet how quickly, that would be tested. The deployment came fast. 18 hours after the final exercise, the team was wheels up on a C-17, headed east. Classified destination. Classified mission. The only thing Callahan knew for certain was that lives were at stake, and her rifle was needed. Reyna briefed them mid-flight, tablet in hand, expression grim. Intelligence has located a high-value target. Idris Cade. Logistics coordinator for a network responsible for attacks across 3 countries. A satellite image appeared on the screen. He's hiding in a compound in the Kestrin corridor. Mountainous. Remote. No air support due to political sensitivities. Ground assault isn't an option. The approach is mined, the compound's fortified. She pulled up a closer view. Cade moves between buildings on a predictable schedule. 0600 local. He crosses from the main house to a secondary structure, 40 meters. 15-second window. That's our shot. Callahan studied the terrain. Angles. Probable wind patterns in a mountain valley at dawn. Range, she said. 3,100 meters. Elevation difference of 400. Wind variable, up to 20 knots. Someone down the row of seats shook his head. That's insane. That's why Callahan's here, Reyna said flatly. She looked at Callahan directly. Can you make it? Callahan examined the image a long moment. I can make it, she said finally. But I'll need time to set up. At least 6 hours before the window. You'll have 8. We insert tonight, move to the firing position under darkness, wait for dawn. Nobody objected. Reyna continued. Rules of engagement. Positive ID on Cade. No collateral damage. 1 shot. A pause, heavier now. If you miss, he goes to ground. We lose him for months. Maybe years. The weight of that settled over the cargo bay. Callahan nodded once. Understood. They inserted at midnight, fast roping into terrain, so rugged it looked like the surface of some other, harsher planet. Jagged peaks. Boulder fields. Air so thin every breath felt incomplete, before it even finished. The climb took 4 hours. By the time they reached the firing position, a rocky outcropping overlooking the valley, Callahan's legs burned, and her lungs ached. Her hands, though. Her hands stayed steady. They always stayed steady. She assembled her rifle, with methodical precision, then deployed her instruments. Anemometer for wind. Kestrel for temperature, humidity, pressure. Laser rangefinder confirming distance, 3,127 meters. Elevation difference, 412. She ran the calculations. The bullet would drop nearly 90 feet across that distance. Wind would push it left, then right, as it descended, through shifting thermal layers. Flight time, nearly 7 seconds. An eternity, in the math of precision shooting. Reyna crouched beside her. How's it looking? Difficult. The valley creates thermal turbulence. Wind isn't consistent across the flight path. Can you make it? Callahan was quiet 3 seconds. Then nodded. Yes. But I'll need to wait for the wind to stabilize. Shoot into active gusts, the margin of error goes unacceptable. How long? However long it takes. We've got your back, Reyna said. Take your time. She moved away, leaving Callahan alone, with her rifle, and the dark. Callahan settled into position. Waited. The sky lightened gradually. Black giving way to deep purple, then indigo, then the pale blue of pre-dawn. Stars faded one by one. The valley emerged below her like a photograph developing in slow motion, buildings and walls, and shadow taking shape out of nothing. At 0545, lights appeared in the compound. At 0555, a door opened. Callahan's pulse didn't change. She'd been controlling her breathing for the better part of an hour, keeping it slow, keeping her heart rate low and level. Through her scope, a man stepped outside. Tall. Bearded. Moving with the unhurried confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Foss's voice, over the radio, barely a whisper. Facial recognition confirms. That's Cade. She tracked him. He paused. Said something to a guard. Began walking toward the secondary building. The 15-second window had begun. Her finger settled on the trigger. Not pulling. Resting. Waiting. The wind, gusting erratically for the last 30 minutes, calmed. The flags on the compound walls hung still. The dust settled. She exhaled halfway. Held the rest. The world narrowed to the crosshairs. To Cade's profile. To a calculation she'd run 100 times already inside her own skull. Let him half a body length. Account for the elevation drop. Trust the wind will hold for 7 seconds. She pulled the trigger. The rifle roared. Recoil slammed her shoulder. The muzzle blast echoed across the valley like distant thunder rolling off a mountain that hadn't asked for it. 7 seconds. Through the scope, she watched the bullet trace its invisible arc, dropping, drifting, seeking its target, with mathematical inevitability. Cade took another step. Then his head snapped back. His body crumpled. Foss's voice crackled through the radio. Impact confirmed. Target down. Repeat. Target down. The compound erupted. Guards running. Shouting. Searching for a threat they couldn't see, and would never find in time. Reyna's voice, sharp. Exfil. Now. Move, move, move. The team collapsed back, from the position, moving fast and low. Callahan broke down her rifle, as she moved, stripping the scope, folding the bipod, packing everything with the practiced efficiency of muscle memory, that didn't need her conscious mind to steer it. They'd covered maybe half the distance to the extraction point, when Foss dropped to one knee, fist raised. Contact, he whispered. 3 o'clock. Maybe 400 meters. Callahan crouched beside him. 3 figures moving parallel to their position. Armed. Local fighters, probably, drawn by the sound of the shot. They hadn't been spotted yet. But they would be. Foss keyed his radio. Command, we've got possible hostiles on our route. Request immediate extraction. Static. Then a voice, tense. Negative, Overwatch. QRFs engaged. All air assets committed. You're on your own for the next 30 minutes. Foss cursed under his breath. Because 30 minutes was a long time to be visible in open terrain, with 3 armed men closing the distance, and a helicopter that wasn't coming. Which meant they had to move fast, low, and smart, or they weren't moving at all. They didn't. They ran, using rock and scrub for cover, putting distance between themselves and the approaching fighters. Callahan's breathing stayed controlled even as her legs burned. Close quarters evasion wasn't her specialty. But she'd been trained for it. Drilled for it. She'd survived worse than this before, though she couldn't remember exactly when, and didn't have the breath to spare on remembering now. Gunfire cracked behind them. Rounds snapped overhead. They reached a dry wadi, dropped into it, used the banks for cover, moved along its length toward the extraction point. The fighters closed. 200 meters now. Moving with the confidence of men who believed they had the advantage. They were wrong. Callahan dropped to one knee. Unslung her rifle. Brought it up in one smooth motion. Foss kept running, then realized she'd stopped, and turned back. What are you doing? Get to the vehicle, she said, calm. Call for immediate extract. I'll buy you time. I'm not leaving you here. That's an order, Lieutenant. Their eyes met. Foss saw something there. Not desperation. Not fear. Just certainty. The kind that comes from someone who's already decided how this ends, and made peace with it before saying the words out loud. He hesitated one more second. Then ran. She turned back toward the fighters. Settled into a firing position. Breathing slow. World narrowing. This wasn't a mile-long shot. This was fundamentals. Breath. Trigger discipline. Follow through. The first fighter crested the ridge. She fired. The .50 caliber round hit center mass, throwing him backward like he'd been struck by a truck. He didn't get back up. The other two dove for cover, shouting, firing blind. She cycled the bolt, waited. One broke cover, trying to flank. She tracked him, led him by half a body length, fired. He dropped. The third fighter didn't move. Smart. He was pinned and he knew it. She keyed her radio. FOSS. Status. At the vehicle. Extraction inbound. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. She could hold 10 minutes. She settled deeper, into position, rifle steady, scanning for movement. The remaining fighter stayed hidden, firing an occasional burst in her general direction, wild and uncoordinated. Time crawled. 8 minutes. 6. Then she heard it, the distant thrum of rotor blades, coming in fast and low. She fired one more suppressive round toward the fighter's position. Stood. Ran. She covered the distance to the extraction point in under 2 minutes, lungs burning, legs screaming. The vehicle was already moving, Foss at the wheel, racing toward the landing zone. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and noise. She threw herself inside. Foss right behind her. The pilot didn't wait. Pulled pitch. Climbed, banking hard away from the ridgeline. Through the open door, Callahan watched the valley fall away. Smoke rising from multiple points in the compound below. Foss collapsed against the bulkhead, chest heaving. That was too close. She didn't respond. She was already checking her rifle, running the post-engagement checklist automatically. Weapon status. Ammunition count. Equipment accountability. Everything in order. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. Overwatch, this is Griffin 1. Target confirmed neutralized. Nice shooting. She closed her eyes. One shot. One life ended. The math was simple. The wait never was. The debrief happened at a forward base 3 hours later. Reyna ran it. Direct, efficient, the way she ran everything. Clean kill, Reyna said. Clean extraction, mostly. Commands pleased. A pause. But something's bothering me. Callahan looked up. What? Those 3 fighters. Local militia, we assumed. Except local militia doesn't usually converge on a firing position, within 4 minutes of the shot. Not unless they already knew roughly where to look. The room went quiet. Foss shifted in his seat. You think someone tipped them off? I think, Reyna said slowly, that somebody with access to our mission parameters gave the opposition just enough information to get lucky. Not exact coordinates. Just a general area. A direction to search. Callahan felt something cold settle behind her ribs. Because if that was true, it meant somebody inside the chain that planned this operation had leaked something. Not much. Just enough. Just enough to nearly get her killed in a dry riverbed 4,000 miles from home. Who had access to the mission parameters, she asked. Reyna's eyes moved slowly around the room. Landed, for a fraction of a second longer than felt comfortable, on Foss. That, she said quietly, is exactly what I intend to find out. Foss didn't flinch. Didn't look away. But something in his face had gone very still, very careful, in a way, that Callahan, trained for 11 years to notice exactly this kind of stillness in exactly this kind of moment, filed away, without saying a word. She trusted Foss. Had trusted him, since that conversation on the perimeter road, since he'd told her about his father, and the regret, that outlived him. But trust, she'd learned a long time ago, was a variable. Same as wind. Same as elevation. And variables shift. She looked at him one more moment. Then looked away. Whatever this was, she'd find out. Same way she found out everything. Patient. Methodical. Waiting for the moment the wind went still. Foss found her 2 nights later, in the equipment shed at the forward base, cleaning a rifle that didn't need cleaning. He stood in the doorway a long moment before speaking. "You think it's me," he said. Callahan didn't look up. "I think somebody talked. It wasn't me. I didn't say it was you. You didn't have to." His voice cracked, just slightly, on the last word. Reyna looked at me in that debrief like she already had my name on a charge sheet. "And you," he stopped. Started again. "You looked at me like I was a variable." She set the cleaning rod down. Looked at him. Because here was the thing. She'd trained 11 years to read faces the way other people read weather. And his face right now wasn't the face of a man caught. It was the face of a man drowning. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "My mother," Foss said, staring at his hands. "She's sick. Has been 2 years. The kind of sick, where the treatment costs more than I make in a decade." A pause. Somebody offered to make that go away. All of it. Every bill. Callahan felt something go cold, and still inside her chest. "Malik." Foss's eyes came up, surprised. "How did you?" "Because that's what he does." Her voice stayed level, but something underneath it had gone hard as flint. "He finds the crack. Then he pours himself into it. 11 years ago, my crack was a drill sergeant, who told me I was wasted on a rifle range. Yours was a hospital bill." A pause. "What did he ask for?" "Nothing at first." Foss's hands twisted together. "Just updates. Where the team was. What the mission parameters looked like. I told myself it was nothing. Administrative. Until Kestrin." He nodded, miserable. "I didn't give him coordinates. I swear to you, I didn't know exactly where the extraction point was going to shift. I just confirmed a general area. Told him the operation was live." His voice broke fully now. "I didn't know it would get back to anyone on the ground. I didn't know it would put you in that riverbed." Callahan sat with that a long moment. The shed was quiet except for the distant hum of a generator somewhere outside, indifferent to everything happening inside these 4 walls. "You should have told me," she said finally. "I know. You should have told Reyna." "I know that too." He looked up, eyes wet now, unashamed of it in a way that told her more than any denial could have. "I'm telling you now." She studied him a long time. Because she understood something about Foss that maybe nobody else in that unit did. He wasn't weak. He was cornered. And cornered men do things strong men never would, not out of cowardice, but out of love pointed in the wrong direction. "Next time he asks you for something," she said, "you come to me first. You're not going to report me?" "I didn't say that." Her voice hardened. "I said you come to me first. What happens after, that depends on what you do between now and then." Foss nodded, slow, like a man being handed a second chance he didn't feel he deserved. He left. Callahan sat alone, with her rifle a long time, turning the shape of it over in her mind. Malik had been building this network for years. Foss wasn't the only crack he'd found. He was just the one she happened to catch. Which meant the real question wasn't whether Foss had talked. It was how far up the chain this actually went. And whether Ashford's suspicions, the ones he hadn't told her yet, the ones sitting in a drawer in his quarters back at Ironcliff, connected to the same rotten root. She didn't know that part yet. She was about to find out. It happened 3 days later, almost by accident, the way the biggest discoveries in her career always seemed to happen. She'd been pulled into administrative processing for her nightglass transfer, sorting through digitized mission archives that needed her signature for record completion. Routine work. The kind of work that put a soldier to sleep standing up. Until she saw the file header. Operation Silverline, Extraction Support, Aircraft Loss Report. Her hand went still over the keyboard. Because Silverline was her operation. 5 years old now, 32 hostages, the shot that had put a badge on her sleeve, that a general had once stood frozen in front of. She'd never seen the aircraft loss report. Nobody had shown it to her. She'd known a plane went down covering her extraction. She'd never known whose. She opened it. The pilot's name sat right there on the first line, plain as anything. Captain Marcus Ashford. She read it twice. Then a third time, the way you read something hoping the letters might rearrange themselves, into a mistake. They didn't. She scrolled further. Found the incident summary. A last-minute reroute of the support sortie, ordered from a coordination cell above the tactical team. Weather cited as the official reason. A footnote, buried 3 pages deep, noting equipment specifications that didn't match the aircraft's actual loadout that night. And at the bottom, an authorization signature. V. Malik. Callahan sat very still. Because Ashford's son had died covering her extraction. And the man who'd ordered the reroute that killed him was the same man who'd recruited her at 19, the same man who'd just signed off on her deployment conditions 2 weeks ago, with a smile that had never once reached his eyes. Which meant the general who'd stood in that armory 5 months ago, staring at her badge like it didn't belong to the physical world, had been standing 3 feet from the person indirectly responsible for taking his son. And he didn't know. She closed the file. Sat with her hands flat on the desk, breathing slow, the way she breathed before every shot she'd ever taken. Controlling the thing that wanted to spiral. Because this wasn't a targeting problem. This wasn't wind, and elevation and a bullet drop she could calculate to the inch. This was a man's grief, sitting 5 years unresolved, and she was the only person alive who could hand him the missing piece. She stood. Grabbed her jacket. Walked out into the heat, without a plan beyond one single, simple fact. Ashford needed to know. Today. From her. Not from a file somebody else might bury, before he ever saw it. She found him at Fort Bragg 2 days later, summoned by a call she'd made herself, cutting through channels she technically wasn't supposed to use. He met her in a small conference room, alone, the kind of room built for conversations nobody wanted a record of. Callahan. His voice carried surprise, and underneath it, something wary. You requested this meeting. Yes, sir. Why? She set a folder on the table between them. Didn't open it yet. 5 years ago, she said, I ran an operation. Silverline. 32 hostages, 1 shot, 4 hours to calculate a distance nobody thought was survivable. She paused. An aircraft went down covering my extraction that night. Ashford's face changed. Slowly. Like something behind it had started sinking, before his expression caught up. I know, he said quietly. Drayton told me. Months ago. Did he tell you who ordered the reroute? Silence. He told me a name, Ashford said, voice careful now. Malik. I found the report, sir. She opened the folder. Slid it across. The pilot's name is on the first page. He looked down. Read it. Callahan watched a general, a man who'd commanded thousands, who'd walked through wars on 3 continents, without his hands shaking once, watch his own son's name sit on a page in front of him like it had just been born there. Marcus, he said. Barely audible. I didn't know, sir. Not until 2 days ago. I swear to you, I didn't know. Ashford didn't answer right away. He sat with the file a long time, his jaw working, his eyes fixed on a single line of text like staring hard enough might change what it said. He never told me, Ashford said finally. Malik stood across from me at a briefing 4 years ago. Shook my hand at my son's memorial. His voice had gone flat, dangerous, the calm before something enormous. Knew exactly what he'd done. And shook my hand anyway. Sir. 32 hostages, Ashford said, cutting her off, not unkindly. Just lost in it. Your shot bought that room. My son's aircraft bought you the time to take it. A long, terrible pause. Both true. At the same time. Callahan sat with that. Because there wasn't a version of this conversation, where she could make that math hurt less. I'm sorry, she said. It felt insufficient. She said it anyway, because sometimes insufficient is the only true thing left to offer. Ashford closed the file. Looked up at her, and something in his face had rebuilt itself, into something harder, more focused. Grief compressing, the way it does in men who've spent decades learning to turn pain into direction instead of letting it sit and rot. He's going to try to use you again, Ashford said. Soon. I don't know the shape of it yet. But Drayton warned me it was coming, and I believe him. I know, sir. When it happens. He held her eyes. I need you to trust me the way I've learned to trust you. You have my word. He nodded once, slow. Something passed between them in that nod that neither of them had words for yet. Not quite father and daughter. Not quite commander and soldier. Something built out of shared grief and shared danger, forged faster than either of them had meant to let it be forged. The call came 4 days later. A hostage situation, this one closer to home than anything she'd worked in years. An American journalist, kidnapped in the Kestrin corridor, moved toward an execution site, with a broadcast deadline attached. Raina briefed the team fast, tension in every line of her voice. 12-hour window before they broadcast her death online. Rescue team can't reach the site in time. We have eyes on the convoy. 1 vehicle, 6 hostiles, 1 hostage. Open desert. Flat terrain. Minimal cover. Callahan studied the satellite feed. Range. 4,200 meters. Maybe more, depending on where they stop. The room went quiet. 4,200 meters. Further than she'd ever fired operationally. Further than anyone alive had ever fired, outside a controlled demonstration built to impress a senator who'd never once understood what he was asking for. Raina looked at her directly. Can you make it? Callahan thought about the young soldier she'd have trained someday, if she lived that long. Thought about Ashford's photograph of his son, sitting on a desk somewhere back at the Pentagon. Thought about every shot she'd ever taken, and every life she'd saved, and every grief that had bought her the room to save it. Get me there, she said. I'll make it. They inserted at dawn, landing on a ridge overlooking the vast, flat expanse of desert the convoy would cross. Foss worked the spotting scope beside her, focused, redeemed in a way words hadn't quite managed to do 2 weeks ago in that equipment shed. Wind's brutal, he said. Gusting to 25 knots. Temperature climbing. Mirage is going to make target identification nearly impossible. I know. Callahan. This is beyond anything we've ever attempted. I know that too. The convoy appeared 2 hours later. A single technical truck, crawling across open ground, kicking up a plume of dust visible for miles. Range, 4,287 meters. She ran the calculations. The bullet would drop over 100 feet. Flight time would exceed 8 seconds. Wind would push it 3 different directions, as it descended, through shifting thermal layers. The margin of error was measured in inches, across 2.5 miles of open, hostile air. The truck stopped. Hostiles climbed out, dragging a bound woman between them. Setting up a camera. Preparing for the execution. Callahan tracked the lead hostile through her scope. Weapon at the hostage's head. This was it. The impossible shot. The one that would either save a life, or haunt her forever, and there was no version of the next 8 seconds, where it split the difference. She exhaled halfway. Pulled the trigger. The rifle thundered. 8 seconds of silence stretched across the desert like something holding its breath. Then impact. Target down, Foss shouted. Hostile down. Through the scope, she watched the lead militant collapse. The others scattered, confused, searching for a threat they'd never see coming, and never understand. The journalist ran. Within minutes, the rescue team swept in, and extracted her. Mission success. Callahan lowered her rifle. Hands steady. Breathing controlled. The impossible had become possible one more time. She didn't know it yet, but that shot became the final piece of evidence Ashford needed. Because the after-action package for the mission crossed Malik's desk for final sign-off, the way every nightglass operation did. And in reviewing it, in trying to route around Callahan's mission refusal clause one more time, Malik made a mistake he'd been making for 5 years, without anyone catching it. He filed the equipment justification using the same falsified loadout language he'd used to authorize the reroute that killed Captain Marcus Ashford. Same phrasing. Same signature shortcuts. Same quiet arrogance of a man who'd never once believed anybody would read closely enough to notice a pattern spanning half a decade. Ashford noticed. 6 months later, she stood in a hearing room at the Pentagon, a folder of evidence in front of her, that had taken half a year, 3 whistleblowers, and 1 very determined 4-star general to assemble. Ashford sat beside her. Drayton across the table. And Victor Malik, seated opposite them, his easy smile finally, for the first time in 11 years, nowhere to be found. The reroute order, from Silverline, the hearing officer said, reading from a page, authorized under your signature, Brigadier General. Equipment specifications falsified to justify the change. 1 aircraft lost. 1 pilot killed. A pause, heavy with something final. The same falsification pattern appears in at least 4 subsequent nightglass operations, including the most recent, 6 months ago. He looked up. Do you have a response? Malik said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at Callahan. Something almost pleading in his eyes, some last appeal to the 11 years he believed had bought him loyalty. I built you, he said quietly. Everything you are. I made that possible. Callahan met his eyes without flinching. You found me, she said. You didn't build me. And everything I've done since, I did for the people standing next to me. Not for you. Malik had nothing left to say to that. The hearing officer read the findings. Career ended. Charges pending. A quiet, procedural unraveling of a man who'd spent decades believing himself untouchable, brought down not by a bullet, from 2.5 miles away, but by patience, paperwork, and the exact discipline he'd once tried to weaponize. Ashford didn't celebrate. He just sat there, hand resting briefly on Callahan's shoulder, the two of them sharing a silence that held more than either of them could have said out loud. 18 months after that, Callahan retired. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a quiet transition to a small piece of land in Montana, mountains stretching for miles, a workshop where she taught the occasional student, who sought her out, and a rhythm to her mornings, that no longer needed a rifle in it to feel complete. Ashford visited that spring. Drove up alone, no aide, no driver, just a man in civilian clothes, who looked smaller somehow, without the 4 stars, and easier in his own skin, because of it. They sat on the porch, watching the sun fall behind the ridgeline, coffee going cold in their hands. "I brought something," he said finally, setting a small case on the table between them. Inside sat a photograph. A young man in uniform, smiling the way soldiers smile, before the world teaches them not to. On the back, in Ashford's handwriting, "This was my son. Thank you for the room you gave him to matter." Callahan held it a long time. Turned it over once. Turned it back. "He looks like you," she said finally. "Around the eyes. Everybody says that." Ashford's voice caught, just slightly, and he let it. Didn't fight it the way he might have 5 years ago, back when grief was still something he thought a general wasn't allowed to show. "I used to hate hearing it. Now I don't mind so much." "You don't have to say anything else," he added, when she stayed quiet. "Just carry it." "I will." They sat there along, while after that, not talking, the mountains doing the kind of slow, patient work mountains do at dusk, turning gold, then rust, then a blue, so deep it looked like something you could fall into. "You ever miss it?" Ashford asked eventually. "The work?" Callahan considered the question the way she considered everything. Slowly. "Honestly. Sometimes," she said. "Not the shooting. The purpose behind it." She looked out at the ridgeline. "I think that's what most people get wrong about people like me. It was never about the rifle. It was about being the reason somebody's family got them back." Ashford nodded, like that answer settled something in him too. "For what it's worth," he said, standing to leave, "I think Marcus would have liked you. He had that same stubbornness. Same refusal to let anybody hand him an easy answer. I'll take that, as the highest compliment anyone's ever given me, sir." It was meant as one. He left before dark, the way he'd come. Alone, unhurried, a man finally walking a little lighter than he had in 5 years. Callahan stood on the porch, after his truck disappeared down the gravel road, the photograph still in her hand, the mountains settling, into full night around her. She thought about the girl she'd been at 19, sitting across from Malik in a windowless room, answering a question she hadn't fully understood the weight of at the time. "How do you feel about doing things most people consider impossible?" She thought about every shot since. Every mile of desert wind she'd learned to read like a second language. Every life on the other end of that math, saved or lost, each one a debt she'd carried, without ever asking to. She thought about Foss, who'd found his own way back, from the thing that nearly broke him, who still called sometimes just to check in, no agenda, just a voice on the other end of a line saying "I'm still trying to be the man I told you I was." And she thought about Ashford's son. A stranger she'd never met, whose absence had bought her the 7 seconds she needed on a mountain ridge 5 years ago, whose photograph would sit on her mantle now for as long as she had a mantle to put it on. Because that was the truth nobody had ever managed to explain to her back, when she was 19, and certain she understood what she was signing up for. The impossible always had a cost. And the ones who paid it rarely got to choose whether their names made it into the history books, or into a locked file nobody read, or into the quiet gratitude of a father, who finally, after 5 long years, had somewhere to put his grief besides an empty chair at a table that used to seat 3. She went inside, as the last light dropped behind the mountains, set the photograph on the mantel next to nothing else, no medals, no citations, nothing that needed explaining to anybody who walked through her door. Just a young man's face. Smiling. The way soldiers smile, before the world teaches them not to. And a woman, who understood, better than almost anyone alive, exactly what that smile had cost. Some things you carry forever. Not because anyone makes you. But because when the world hands you the weight of what you saved, and what it cost to save it, the only honest thing left to do is hold it. Steady. The way she held everything. Quiet. Precise. And, finally, at peace with being seen.